Hey friends, my name is Z and you're watching Yi Makes It Easy. And welcome to a new video for IGCSE Business Studies, and today we have the specification point of 1.4, the types of business organization. And by the end of the lesson, you should be able to describe 1.4.1, the main features of different forms of business organization, which includes these sub-specifications right here. So check out the pinned comment for all the timestamps. But we'll move on now to 1.4.1, the main features of business organization. And the heading includes the sole traders, partnerships, private and public limited companies, franchises and joint ventures, as well as unincorporated business and limited companies, and the risk, ownership and limited liability. So there are several main forms of business organizations in the private sector. These include the sole traders, partnerships, private limited companies, public limited companies, franchises, and the joint ventures. And we'll look into each one of those now, starting with sole trader, which is the most common form of business organization, and it is a business owned and operated by just one person, and the owner is a sole proprietor. One of the reasons it is such a common factor or such a common form of organization is because there are so few legal requirements to set it up. And there are only a few legal regulations which must be followed, which includes these 3 points. Number 1, the owner must be registered and send annual accounts to the government tax office. The names of the business is significant and it must be registered. And in some other countries, such as the UK, it is sufficient for the owner to put the business name on all the business documents and to put a notice in the main office stating who owns the business. And number 3, in some industries, the sole trader must observe laws which apply to all businesses in the industry. This includes health and safety laws and obtaining a license, like to sell alcohol or operate a taxi. Advantage includes there are few legal regulations. The owner is his own boss, and he has the freedom to choose his own holidays, or the hours of work, and the prices to be charged. And they have a close contact with customers, and they have incentive to work hard as the owner keeps all the profit, and the owner enjoys complete secrecy. But this disadvantage includes no one to discuss business matter, and you do not have any benefit of limited liability. They don't have enough capital. The business is likely to remain small, and no one will take the control of the business if you're ill. Then we have partnerships. A partnership is a form of business in which 2 or more people agree to jointly own a business. In some countries in India, there's a maximum limit of 20 people, and partnerships can be set up easily by asking someone to become his partner. This is called a verbal agreement. The partners will be advised to create a written agreement with the partner called the partnership agreement or deed of partnership. Without this document, the partners may disagree on who puts the most capital into the business or who is entitled to more of the profits. Advantage includes more capital can be invested, responsibilities of running business are now shared, and both partners were motivated to work hard to benefit from the profits. But disadvantage includes the partners will not have limited liability, which means the liability of shareholders in the company is limited to only the amount of they invested, and the business will not have separate legal identity. If one of the partners die, which means this, then the partnership would end, which is an unincorporated business, and the partners can disagree due to the lack of trust. And if one partner is inefficient or dishonest, then the other one could suffer by losing money. And most countries limit the number of partners to 20 people. Then we have private limited companies. A private limited company is an incorporated business, and they have separate legal status from the owners, meaning that if a company exists separately from the owners, and they will still continue to exist if one of the owners should die, and the company can make contracts or legal agreements, and the company accounts are kept separate from the accounts of the owners. The companies are jointly owned by the people who have invested in the business. They buy shares and they are called shareholders. In a private limited company, The directors are usually the most important or majority shareholder. Advantage includes the share can be sold to a large number of people, and all shareholders have limited liability, which means if the company failed with debts owing to the creditors, the shareholders could not be forced to sell their positions to pay debt. But disadvantage includes there are significant legal matters which have to be dealt before a company can be formed, and two important forms documents to be sent, which are these. The shares in the private limited company cannot be sold or transferred to anyone else without agreement of other shareholders, and accounts of a company are less secret than for either sole trader or partnership. Then we have public limited companies. This form is most suitable for very large businesses, and public limited companies are able to raise the capital to expand nationally or even internationally when other people or investors purchase shares. And here's a major mistake about public limited companies. Public limited companies are not in the public sector of industry. They are not owned by a government but by private individuals. Hence, they are in the private sector. In the UK, the title PLC, like this right here, means public limited companies. The term limited in the UK refers to private limited companies. However, in other countries, the title limited is used to refer public limited companies. So one thing to note here, to mix up if you're in the UK or other countries. And advantages include limited liability to shareholders, as I mentioned what limited liability is just now. Incorporated business and has a separate legal identity to the owners or shareholders. Opportunity to raise a very large capital sum. There's no restriction on buying, selling, transfer of shares. Business trading as a public limited company usually has high status and should find it easier to attract suppliers prepared to sell goods on credit and banks willing to lend it to it than other types of businesses. But disadvantages include the legal formalities of forming such companies are very complicated, and more regulations and controls over PLC to try to protect interests of shareholders. And selling shares to the public is expensive, and original owners may lose control of business if over 50% of the shares are to the public. So that's why some of the businesses, they have 49% of the shares are to the public, and the owners keep 51% of the share, so that they have a majority of the share to themselves. And lastly, it's expensive to set up public limited companies. Then we have control and ownership in the public limited companies. In all sole trader businesses and partnerships, the owners have control over how the business is run, and basically they take the decisions. And this is also the case in most private limited companies with relatively few shareholders. And with a public limited company, the situation is very different. There are a lot of shareholders and they are all invited to the annual general meeting, or the AGM for short. It is a legal requirement for all the companies, and the shareholders may attend and vote on who they want to be on the board of directors for the coming year. So here's the chart or diagram. And the control and ownership. The shareholders own, but the directors and managers control. This might be important for the shareholders, as the directors and managers may run the business and managers may run the business to meet their own objectives. And this could be increased status, growth of the business to justify higher management salaries, or reducing dividends to shareholders to pay for expansion plans. Then we have franchises. This is an extremely widespread form of business operation. The franchisor is a business with a product or service idea that it does not want to sell to customers directly. Instead, it appoints franchisees to use the idea or product and sell it to the consumers. Two of the best known international examples of franchise are McDonald's restaurants, as we all know, and The Body Shop. And here's advantage and disadvantage. To the franchisor, the person selling the franchise, advantage include the franchisee buys a license from the franchisor to use the brand name. The expansion of the franchise business is faster. The management of outlets is the responsibility of the franchisee, and all products sold must be obtained from the franchisor. But disadvantage includes the poor management of one franchise outlet could lead to bad reputation. For example, we have a lot of McDonald's chain, but if one McDonald's outlet performs poorly or have a bad reputation, the whole brand name of McDonald's would have a bad reputation. And another disadvantage is that the franchisee keeps the profits from the outlet. And to the franchisee, the person buying the franchise, advantage includes the chances of business failure are reduced, the franchisor pays for advertising, the supplies are obtained from central source, the franchisor, fewer decisions to make than independent business, training for staff and management provided by the franchisor. Banks are often willing to lend franchisees due to low risk. But disadvantage includes the less independence than with operating a non-franchise business. They may be unable to make decisions that would suit local area, and the license fee must be paid to the franchisor and perhaps a percentage of annual turnover. Then we have joint ventures. A joint venture is when two or more businesses agree to start a new project together, sharing the capital and the risk and the profits. Many European companies have set up joint ventures in China with Chinese businesses, as the local managers will have a good knowledge of the market needs and consumer taste. Advantage includes the sharing of costs is very important for expensive projects such as new aircraft, local knowledge when joint venture company is already based in the country, and the risks are shared. But disadvantage of joint ventures include that if the new project is successful, then the profits have to be shared with the joint venture partner, and disagreements over important decisions might occur, and the two joint venture partners might have different ways of running a business, which leads to because different cultures, which leads to a fight between the two joint venture partners. Then we have business organization in the public sector, like public corporations. Here's in the public sectors. Public sector is a very important part of the economy of all mixed economy. The term public sector includes all businesses owned by the government or the state and the local government, and public services such as hotels, schools, fire services, and government departments. Public corporations. These are wholly owned by the state or the central government. They are usually businesses which have been nationalized, which means they were once owned by private individuals but were purchased by government. Examples of these include water supply and rail services. However, these businesses are now being privatized. And privatized is basically the opposite of nationalized. And to sum up, nationalized means that the private company becomes they were purchased by government, and privatized means that the government are now the companies that were owned by government are now owned by private individuals. And public corporations are owned by the government, but it does not directly operate the business. Government ministers appoint a board of directors who will be given the responsibility of managing the business. The government will, however, make clear what the objectives of the business should be, and the directors are expected to run the corporations according to these objectives so that they don't stay off track. Then we have advantage and disadvantage of public corporations. Advantage includes some industries are considered so important that government ownership is thought to be essential, like water supply. Number 2, if industries are controlled by monopolies, because it would be a wasteful to have competitors, like to set up railway lines to a certain town, then these natural monopolies are often owned by the government. And if an important business is failing and likely to collapse, the government can step in to nationalize it. And important business public services like TV and radio broadcasting are often in public sector, and non-profitable but important programs can still be made available to the public. And then disadvantage includes there are no private shareholders to insist on higher profits and efficiencies, and government subsidies can lead to inefficiency as managers will always think the government will help them if the business makes a loss. And number 3, often there is no close competition to the public corporations. There is therefore a lack of incentive to increase consumer choice, increase efficiency, or even improve customer service. And number 4, the government can use these businesses for political reasons, for example to create more jobs before election. This prevents public corporations being operated like other profit-making business. Then lastly, we have some key terms for 1.4 specification, the types of business organization. Sole trader is a business owned by one person with unlimited liability. A sole trader can employ other people, but there's only one person who owns the business. Limited liability means the liability of the shareholders in the company is limited to only the amount they invested, and the condition by which shareholders are legally responsible for the debts of a company only to the extent of the nominal value of their shares. And unlimited liability means that the owners of a business can be held responsible for the debts of the business they own. Their liability is not limited to the investment they made in the business, which is basically the opposite of limited liability. Partnership is a form of business in which 2 or more people agree to join own the business. And a partnership agreement is the written and legal agreement between the business partners. It is not essential for partners to have such an agreement, but it is always recommended. An unincorporated business is one that does not have a separate legal identity, and sole traders and partnerships are unincorporated business. And a legal identity is any company or organization that has legal rights and responsibilities, including tax filings. In an unincorporated business like partnership, if one of the partners died, then the partnership would end, which is not really good. Then we have incorporated business. Incorporated business are companies that have separate legal status for their owners. Shareholders are the owners of a limited company. They buy shares which represent part ownership of the company. And then we have private limited companies. Private limited companies are businesses owned by shareholders, but they cannot sell shares to the public. And public limited companies, they are businesses owned by shareholders, but they can sell shares to the public, and their shares are tradable on the stock exchange, like Bursa Malaysia, NYSE, or Nasdaq. Annual General Meeting, or AGM, is a legal requirement for all companies, and shareholders may attend and vote on who they want to be on the board of directors for the coming year. Dividends, they are payments made to the shareholders from the profits after tax of a company. They are returned to the shareholders for investing in the company, like a thank you for them to investing in the company. Franchise is a business based upon the use of brand names, promotional logos, and trading methods of an existing successful business. The franchisee buys the license to operate the business from the franchisor. And joint venture. A joint venture is when 2 or more businesses start a new project together, sharing capital, risk, and profits. And public corporations. A public corporation is a business in the public sector that is owned and controlled by the state or the government. And that's it for this 1.4 specification for IGCSE Business Studies, which will look into the types of business organization. And I hope you just found it useful and you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, please leave a like and subscribe and comment down below if you have any questions or criticisms. And also check out my Instagram in the description for more daily content. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, stay safe and happy learning.